Okay, I think it is time to start. We are not live streaming this session, but it is recorded and shared afterwards. We actually have a really good amount of people following us online today, but this is us right now. So the aim of this session is to inspire to more multidisciplinary research initiative related to AI and child sexual abuse, and help identify where are the opportunities, sweet spots, and what are potential barriers. Come in. We think it can be research that leads to the development of new technical solutions. We did talk about that this morning. But it can also be using AI tools and knowledge to support in, for example, medical, social, behavior science, and of course also more research about how AI affects the behavior and vulnerability of children in different forms. We talked about how AI-generated child sexual abuse material affects children, but there can be so many other ways. So that and much more. And I think the point is that we don't really know. And we who are working in this field, we are, to be very honest, a fairly small echo chamber of people with fairly limited knowledge, and especially in AI and tech. There are some of us, but we're few. So we desperately we need to bring in new perspectives, new knowledge, new voices from other fields. And when we developed and start to work with Stella Polaris, one of the things, or kind of one bold ambition, maybe, I don't know, an ambition was to make Sweden a pioneering country in utilizing AI to combat child sexual abuse. I know the AI Commission is talking about, having Sweden being a pioneer in the field of AI. So why not just add this sector to it? And we felt that there were several aspects working in our favor. There are strong traditions and practices in Sweden for protecting children. We were the first abolishing corporal punishment against children. We have a strong child rights sector. Linda and Christoffer, world-leading researchers in their fields. We also have an openness and tradition of collaboration between academia and industry. We have a lot of tech innovators. We were early in digitalization. We talk fairly openly about this issue. So there's a lot that would, make us potentially pioneers in this field. And when we started the project Stella Polaris, one of the first things we did 3 years ago was to do a little baseline study. So we contacted tech institutions, universities, those who had some kind of AI education at the universities, and asked, do you in any way apply this to children, to children's rights, protection of children from child sexual abuse? Are there any kind of student programs, any students doing their exam work or kind of anything? And the baseline was 0. Maybe we didn't ask the right question or everybody, but we didn't find any. We have found some examples from other universities, but not in Sweden. So since then, we have been doing some kind of some talks, seminars, webinars together with several tech institutes and university, and there are some interesting projects coming. And we also were in contact with some of the big research funders in Sweden. With WASP, we have a representative here today, Forte Vetenskapsrådet, and asked, would it be possible to use, or kind of within your funding programs or calls for grants, would it be possible to apply for research kind of projects also addressing this issue as one of kind of the broader in kind of human sciences, kind of AI for good, or whatever they're called. And the answer we got was often yes. So we do believe there might be funding. We will ask more about that. So the intersection of AI and child sexual abuse touches on a wide range, we've said it before, scientific disciplines that can and should address this critical issue. Computer science, psychology, forensics, law, public health, social work, etc. And we're interested in exploring how different forms of AI research in robotics, machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing can be of help in those disciplines. So we have a really interesting panel that will help us explore this further. We have Christoffer Rahm, psychiatrist and researcher at Karolinska Institutet. We have already met you. We have Amy Loutfi, professor in computer science at Örebro University. Linda Jonsson, researcher at Marie Cederschiöld University College. Kristina Knaving, senior researcher at RISE Research Institute in Sweden. And Anders Ynnerman, professor of scientific visualization at Linköping University and program director of WASP, which is the largest individual research program in Sweden, which has a focus on AI, right? Hope I was, you can correct me if there was anything. So can you all come up and we'll just stand here. So I will start with a little icebreaker. We'll see if we can keep it short, but just to get to know you a bit. So I would like to ask if you can share a moment in life that was defining for the path that led you to the work that you're doing today. A memory, a meeting, an interest, anything. Who wants to start? Anything? Christoffer.
Well, I can start. Then I immediately get to think of a couple of meetings I had during my training to become psychiatrist. First one was when I met a quite young woman who sought emergency psychiatric care for anxiety and nightmares and for self-destructive behavior. And that was the first time actually I got to talk to someone who had a history of being victim of child sexual abuse, because that was the memories who kept on dominating much of her inner life, even it was quite a period later. But then also just a few weeks later, I continued my training on a sexual medicine clinic, where I met someone who sought help for impulses of abusing children. He wanted help to not act out, and then I tried to see what could I do for him, and I found that there were no evidence-based interventions described in the literature, and that was when I decided to start this kind of research that I'm still in.
Thank you. Amy, what's your story?
Well, I mean, my background is computer science, and I've been doing research in AI since 2001. And one of the moments during my PhD, which sort of gave me an awakening, was when I was sitting in my office, and as a computer scientist, you're doing a lot of programming. And at that time, I was doing research actually about olfaction, so the sense of smell, and trying to get robots to be able to endow them with the same ability. And I think, after a lot of trying and tribulation, I realized that I needed to go back to the human. And for me, I think this is something that has followed me throughout my research, is that even though I fit very squarely in the field of computer science, I always have to go back to humans and humanity to try and get inspiration for the research that we're doing. And that research on AI is not only about duplicating what humans do on machines, but sometimes once in a while looking back at humans to try and understand ourselves better.
Thank you. Kristina?
So I'll go a long way back. When I was, in 1992, I first got access to the internet. And this was before the first web browser, before anything like that. and I found news groups which were communication channels where people talked about things. And this was before everyone got internet. It was before the toxic internet in a sense as well. And there's the shining vision of people talking and exchanging knowledge with each other. And even though we also have now the vision of the internet as a problem, I still want to point out that it's a remarkable achievement, this ability to talk, to communicate with people who are different. I mean, I met people with completely different opinions. And that's why I then focused on being close to technology.
Thank you. Anders.
It's hard. It's a hard question. Am I on? Okay. It's actually two different things. If it's okay, if I just very briefly mention two things. I think the first one was I was 6 years old, and I watched the landing on the moon. And that was one of those moments when I thought, wow, this is so amazing that mankind can fly to the moon and come back again alive. So I decided to become an astronaut, and I failed miserably at that, as you know.
Most of us do.
I hate Christopher Fuglesang. But so that was a moment in my life there back. And the other more difficult moment was now 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, when my daughter got really sick, and she passed away. And I got really devoted to try to do whatever I can to prevent children from suffering. And now I'm the chair of the Hospital Clown Association, trying to work with them. And when I got the chance to actually work with this association here, which is really core to preventing children from suffering, I just jumped on that opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to be able to contribute here.
Thank you.
Hi.
Linda.
Yeah, and I did my PhD on children who are sexually exploited of different reasons, and we were looking into like how can we understand that they go to these meetings and so on and so forth. But then I realized that our most vulnerable children are not receiving support or treatment when they have disclosed. And that really was a deal breaker for me in my in my work, professional work. No, but it was so important to me, because then I thought, what after disclosure, what is actually happening to the child? What do they receive? Who do they meet? And that is where my research is now. So yeah.
Thank you, and thank you all of us. I think the next kind of just the question to set the stage is what we mean when we talk about AI. I talked to a person at lunch who said, well, and we talked about how we, in many of us in our sector, we don't know AI, we don't really understand tech, and you talked about people in the government who do not really understand tech, and he said that at the point when you speak to a person and they just talk about AI in a way that you immediately feel that they have no clue of what that is. So can we help each other to understand what it is and kind of what we talk about when we talk about AI? So Amy, can you first help us with this kind of...
And I really appreciate the question, because we were actually talking today about the importance to nuance AI, that AI is, as we heard earlier today, an umbrella term. And it's an umbrella term that refers to a number of different... a number of different... I guess
we can be a bit close.
Come on.
Sorry.
A number of different technologies, if you will, or a number of different types of algorithms, where each one, in a sense, also corresponds to something that we humans do. So it is the ability, for example, to communicate. That's what we call natural language processing. It is the ability to learn, and machine learning is one part of that. But it's also very much the ability to reason. There's something called machine reasoning or automated reasoning. It is the ability to plan and schedule sequences of events. That's something that also some of us are better than others at doing. And you have a number of these different kinds of technologies that all fall under the umbrella of AI, not least generative AI, which is the new one, right? So AI is a very, very large area that
Mm.
encompasses a lot of different technologies.
Thank you. I think that was really important. Anything else any of you want to add to that?
I mean, I can add to that, and Amy and I are similar in our background as well. So, what I felt this morning was that this distinction between the AI and the human needs to be made much clearer, and the role of the human, because what we're looking at now is very much human-centered AI, and that the methods that we have, the AI methods that are there, and I agree that we should not call it AI, call it lots of different things, right? But what we do is that we use them to offload the human, so that the cognitive load on the human decreases. And someone mentioned this morning that it's not very good at distinguishing cats from dogs. It actually is, right? And the example that I use for that is we use that a lot in detection of cancer. So in the workflow of analyzing the pathology, the tissue testing, we can clearly say this is cancer, this is not cancer, this is cancer, this is not cancer, and then you have the things in between, the cat dogs in between, and that's where the pathology spends the time. And this is directly translatable to the situation that we have here. We offload, cognitive offloading, and making sure that we spend the time on the cases that are really important. So it's a human together with a system that can make the difference. And I think that was lost a little bit this morning.
So glad we have this session then,
Right.
to clear that out. So I would actually like to start with Anders and Kristina, because and to hear if you have any more reflections on the mornings, and I can throw in Amy as well, kind of the kind of AI researchers here, and ask if you have any immediate kind of reflections on the topic of today, how it relates to your research fields a bit more. I don't know. Yeah, Kristina.
If we talk about offloading, so I'll just continue from that about and this matters of CSAM. I think that generative AI is problematic in the sense that we haven't designed any good offloading systems to start with, or understanding systems, which means that we don't exactly know when to on and offload solutions that can hallucinate, that have immense powers or abilities in some respects and less than immense in others, like reflection. And so one thing I feel that relates to my work is that I talk a lot about AI ethics and the understanding possibilities but also risks and how to balance them. You have to understand both to help people to understand what using it means, what it does, what it doesn't. Because I think that since it's at everyone's fingertips, this is more than trained pathologists in this case. This will be everyone. And that's an entirely different set of structuring to be done in society.
Go ahead.
You go first.
I go. Well, I think my reflection from this morning, I mean, it's very interesting to hear all these multiple perspectives, and I think we're going to talk about multiple perspectives also now. One thing that I think worried me from this morning was when we heard from the legal perspectives, just how everything was always very complicated. And the need, I think, that many of us have to have some simplicity to navigate these very complicated issues. And I think more discourse has to take place, particularly between people of different disciplines, to really meet, but also to dig into these complexities. So that was my reflection from this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anders.
I kind of disagree a little bit. That's more fun if we do
Yeah.
right? I think one of the problems is that what I'm seeing in Sweden is one of the most AI skeptic nations in the world. We're terrified, and because of people like Max Tegmark and Nick Bostrom and Sweden's contribution to AI, and we're missing out on a lot of opportunities because of this. And that mindset needs to change. And then we're topping that with the regulatory frameworks that's coming out. That's entirely risk-based. Instead of looking at the possibilities, that we should have a possibility pyramid and say, what is it that we're missing? How does that manifest itself in terms of what Kristina is saying? What I was frustrated by this morning is that we tend to chase, and we're sort of behind the curve all the time. And we're finding someone who's using AI in a bad way, and then we have to try to fill the hole, right? Try to stop prevention, like catching up all the time. Why not try to actually work ahead of the curve instead and see what kind of ways can we invent to actually prevent things from happening before they happen, and use AI so that we get the advantage instead of trying to catch up all the time. And I think this is symptomatic for, in particular, Sweden, but in Europe in general, is that we tend to take that role, catching up. And I'm a little bit frustrated by that. And I'm not saying that you're wrong.
But no, but I think you're slightly misrepresenting it, because I'm talking about giving people understanding the possibilities and the risks. Because in a sense, catching up, teaching people how to work with technology is not catching up. It's exactly what you do, but for the entire population. It's not saying, stop this, we're not going to have any generative AI, because I find it deeply fun, actually. It's saying, okay, so like everything else you're going to use, like your car, you need to figure out how it works.
But in your discourse, there's continuously this, this is dangerous for this and that. So that's not what I'm hearing when you're talking. What I'm hearing is, the way that it can be used in a bad way.
I think that it demands reflection.
Right.
Just
absolutely.
like in your case. Yeah. And as humans, we have to figure out when it demands reflection. When do we put an AI system, when should I write in a mail entirely by AI, and when should I think about it? I mean, it's like working with other people. You think about, and I think that the best thing I've ever heard about AI is that you hire an AI. You don't buy an AI, you hire it. Like you hire a human, and you think about what it's good at and what it isn't good at, and how you work together with it, and where it's likely, and then you think about where it's likely to provide something deeply weird, and where it's likely to provide something less deeply weird.
No, go ahead.
I mean, we totally agree. We probably
I think
agree,
we
right?
agree.
But one of the most important skills for the future is critical thinking, right?
Yes.
Okay. And to really reflect over what it is that you're doing. Kids are extremely good at critical thinking, much better than the generation that we're in, and my generation in particular, right? So there's hope for the future, because they will get used to actually criticizing, reflecting in a much stronger way than we are at this point. And by necessity, they will have to do that, because there will be all of these tools out there that can be used in the ways that we don't want them to be used. Right? Yep. But also, I really like the comment this morning about about Holland and the bicycle paths. It's down there, right? And I think the situation really calls for some effort like that, and we're all frustrated by the fact that anyone can send emails to anyone, right? That there's complete openness in the internet. It was designed for an era that doesn't exist anymore. So controlling a little bit of the flows, and also introducing methods to do watermarking and quality assurance. I'm on a committee in the Royal Academy. We're thinking about how can we help society to actually curate knowledge and define the processes that generate knowledge and the truth. And can we help in some sense in doing that? Should we do that? And should anyone say that knowledge is good or bad? What does that mean to society? All of those questions are there. But I think some sort of effort is needed, because anyone can publish a book in Sweden that can be used in the schools. There's no quality assurance anymore. Used to have that, but it's not there. So I think this whole discussion today is a part of this very big problem with what is truth and what is knowledge.
Can I ask? So I think Kristina, you mentioned earlier also, and related to this frustration with kind of lawyers and everything is complex and we need to wait and there can be errors and bias and it's not perfect. And you talked about the importance of having kind of more kind of closer to the practice and kind of collaborating with the kind of content matter expertise, and maybe looking at applying AI in different, we can't have one regulation of all AI, or maybe we can, but it kind of in practice, it also is about how do we use it in this field and in this field and in others.
Yes, in practice it's a faceted field, just like humans, and that's why we need to. I'm not for pulling the plug, and I don't think it's possible to do that anyway. but I'm certainly for trying to figure out how we live with it, because I do in a way agree. I love the internet. I don't want to remove the ability to talk and to talk unhindered. But we have to figure out, how does the technology work? How do humans work? In order just to start testing approaches, because we do test approaches. We've done that before, and we don't let everyone have a tech nuke, for example. We know that most people will handle them very well. And I'm not saying that AI is a tech nuke as such, but I am saying certainly that we could do with a lot more cross-disciplinary research in this matter. And I think, hopefully, we agree about this.
I think so. We will hear some example of one concrete example and one kind of potential example of how we can work in partnership between different kind of disciplines. So I want to start with Christoffer and Amy, who work together, and Cederschiöld has funded the work of Christoffer Rahm and his research team for almost 7 years now. And you have piloted and evaluated a groundbreaking method called Prevented. You talked about it a bit in the morning, where you reach out to and offer a cognitive behavior treatment to people with sexual interest in children. So these people are contacted through fora where people share child sexual abuse material on the darknet. People that you think might never would have been open to psychological treatment, but it turns out they are. So this pilot is now published and internationally recognized as kind of the strongest evidence, right, in the field, and has inspired several other research initiatives. And one of them is called Project Bridge. And we at Stella Polaris, we saw the potential for maybe AI can be a part of this and help. So Amy and Christoffer, can you tell us a bit how this collaboration started and what is it about?
Yeah. So I can start with the backstory. Actually, the collaboration started at an event almost a year ago, very similar to this one, where we had a number of AI researchers gathering together, and we heard about the work that Stella Polaris was doing. We heard about motivational interviews. And we started to discuss and together with Stella Polaris think about, what could AI do concretely and shortly in order to develop, I would say, a proof of concept. And of course, as researchers, funding is always an issue. And we thought, well, where could we maybe find resources to do something that was almost ready to be launched, but also had value from our different fields, our different perspectives. So value from the AI side and the computer science side, but also value for researchers in psychology. And so we looked at motivational interviewing, and we have some slides so we can describe more what it is. And we saw the possibility, a bit like Anders was saying, to insert AI at the right moments. And maybe Christoffer, you want to say a little bit more about the motivational interviewing and how that looks?
Yeah, sure. As Britta mentioned, we had this online cognitive behavioral therapy program, and it was successful in reducing the impulses and urges and the related behaviors against children among perpetrators or at-risk persons for perpetrating. But we also noticed that some of these individuals, they actually needed something more than we could provide in an online setting like that. They would need medical treatment and a more proper psychiatric assessment that could only be done in person. But then there was this challenge to encourage these individuals to take the step and leave their anonymous online existence and seek face-to-face treatment somewhere locally close to where they live. So that was where the idea of adding motivational interviewing to it all began. So now in this ongoing project called Bridge, we collaborate with universities from 6 countries to reach out to high-risk individuals. On the dark web, for example, we collaborate with the search engine on the dark web to collect high-risk individuals and using motivational interviewing, try to encourage them to take the step and actually seek this help that they need. But there is a problem here, and the problem is that the demand is much higher than the resources can ever meet up. We now have practitioners working, as I said, in several countries, but the demand when we start to scale up things the next coming years, we will not be able to meet up with that. So one of the more time-consuming and energy demanding parts of motivational interviewing is what happens behind the scenes. That is to code the interview, to feedback to the practitioner whether it was a good treatment session, and whether they actually used all the tricks and trades of motivational interviewing to make this individual take the step and start living their criminal lifestyle. So in order to do that, we will try and use artificial intelligence together with your team at Örebro University to develop a kind of supervisor tool for the individual practitioner that we at the next step can use to make this more available on a larger scale. We do this beta test. We try to develop a beta version this year, and then next year we have a new consortium of 5 countries that we will try to do this to try it more together with real patients, because this is only based on previously recorded chat interviews with clients that have been through an ordinary chat-based motivational interviewing series.
And just to give you a flavor of what it's about, so this sub-project that we're doing together, we call it MyGPT. So MI stands for motivational interviewing, and then GPT because we're using large language models, but probably we won't actually use GPT at the end, we'll see. And just as Christoffer said, that if you look on the slide here, you see a dialogue, and you see the coding after each of these statements or each of these sentences. And it's this coding that we would like to automate with a large language model. And what we've tried to do now, we've only started now for a few months, but what we've tried to do, and just to show you some snapshots, is asking a large language model to follow the procedures that one should use should one be a human who is doing the actual manual coding, according to a fixed, let's say, taxonomy, based on the definitions that we use here in these codes. So you see, for example, the top one is a question and it's indicating some kind of partnership. You see that there's a sentence here, things haven't been moving at the speed you're used to. This is a more complex reflection that's also demonstrating some empathy and so on. And what we found that we can do is we can take these dialogues, we can feed them into a large language model, and we actually get fairly good results, because we're using the large language model to do what I would call almost a sentiment analysis. And if any of you have used, for example, ChatGPT, you know that it's not just a one-time interaction, but you can actually refine the interactions if you're not quite happy with the results that you get back. So, for example, here, and if you can see that the large language model is actually tagging according to motivational interviewing, let's say, protocols. But we can actually enter into a dialogue where perhaps we're not satisfied with the results, and so we ask the large language model to improve. Now, this in itself is not hard. This in itself, perhaps, we talked about multidisciplinary collaboration. Where is the, let's say, AI contribution? We have these tools available, but what makes this a challenge is that when we are working with sensitive material, we need to do things on premises. So we can't go and use, for example, these online in the cloud solutions, but we have to do things on-prem. We need to use our own models, at least basing on publicly available models, but models that we have control over. We need to understand not only how to do the refinement process, but the refinement process particularly for the setting of child sexual abuse, because we may see that there are certain refinements that need to be made in this case. And today we've talked a lot about, you know, where does AI make mistakes? And one of the things we want to do is really do a rigorous scientific analysis about where are the discrepancies between human coders and AI. and why do those discrepancies exist, so that we really do understand where we can leverage from the technology, but also where the limits of the technology are. Then we think that there's a lot of extras that we can do. For example, not only having dialogues that are written, but also analyzing things in real time, maybe even doing speech to text, and perhaps in the long term getting to the point where some of the motivational interviewing can actually be done automatically. So that means you actually have a chatbot which is doing the motivational interviewing with a human and seeing, exactly as Anders was saying, not only how to do it, but when to do that. When do we put that kind of process into place?
Yeah, and I also think this is a really interesting test balloon, because from psychiatry we know there are many psychotherapeutical models out there that show good promise in research settings, but then lose a bit of their strength in clinical settings because those involved in research are highly skilled and closely supervised, and they are super ambitious all the time. But if we could create this kind of supervisory tool that could be used maybe also for other psychotherapeutic schools and out in clinical practice, that would be really good. And I also think, for example, in other parts in child protection field, it could be of interest, where you have a highly manualized way of interviewing or interpreting what is being said, such as in interrogations of children that are victims to child sexual abuse. If you want to maintain a high and reliable level and quality of these interrogations, maybe this kind of tool can be used even in that context, because what it's actually studying is the interrogator, the interviewer, the practitioner, and not too much the child or the victim or the study participants. So that also makes it you come around some of the problems associated with using AI in human research.
Thank you. And Kristina is waving, so if you want to comment, but also if there are comments from the others on the applicability or lessons or inspiration from this.
So I can say this is very inspirational because you're working together from two different fields. And then I'd like to bring up the question of funding, if I may. Because at the bottom of this entire system is how we fund research. That if you go back, most researchers were funded by getting a professorial chair and then having a salary and getting to do exactly what they wanted. Not necessarily a good recipe, I'm saying, for getting to the right points, of course, but nowadays most researchers will look for funds through different funding applications, and I'd argue that what is needed here is cross-disciplinary, and that most research funding is too targeted to complex questions and also too short to really arrive at good interdisciplinary research. And very many EU funding projects, slightly longer but still very large, lots of people, don't even arrive at proper communication between the different actors. Very often people just share the money and go research what they did before. Sorry about that, but still. So that's one thing I really would like to talk about. What kind of, especially since we have Anders who do fund people, how do we fund people to create good cross-disciplinary research, especially in questions where you don't know the answer beforehand?
Should I answer now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, one of the first things you have to realize about this particular domain, but it's happening in other areas of technology as well, is that the development is moving at the speed of light. So the distance in the past, in the olden days, we had some researcher did something and published a paper, then it takes 10 years before you have it out in a product that you can use, right? Now we're down to a few months, in particular in AI. So that means that the distance from the basic research, the ones that are in innovating new methods, new algorithms, new AI approaches, and the actual commercial entities has gone shrinking like this, boom, right? And this is happening all over the world. And if you look at big tech in the US, this is where that is happening. That's why big tech is publishing more papers than the academic researchers these days, because they are actually there with access to the applications and to some extent the multidisciplinary teams that you're talking about. So that's happening more on the commercial side than on the academic side. So we're struggling to keep up with that from our perspective. So that's sort of the basis, and the program that I'm chairing is the Wallenberg AI program, and I should say that it's a wave of competence that we're putting out there now, because we're graduating 1 PhD per week, and we'll keep doing that until 2031. And this is a massive injection of competence into the system. Okay, so pardon the sort of lengthy answer to your question here, but I think that what we need to do is to make sure that we join forces, and it's the commercial forces, it's the basic research, the academic forces, and the applied layer is almost gone, because it goes directly from that basic research to the commercial entities. How do we rig such a system? Well, what we are doing is that we have, within the WASP program, we have research arenas where companies are coming in, working together with the academic researchers. We have a lot of industrial PhD students. We have now an entity that we call NESTs, which stands for Novelty, Excellence, Synergy and Teams, where we are putting together people from different disciplines to attack these problems. So, so make a longer story short, what we're looking for is, AI researchers who are interested in this domain and would like to tie in competences from other fields, and then there's an open door to approach WASP. And the name is also on the WASP management team here, so we will be super happy to talk about the possibilities there and for this extremely good cause. But WASP is also a program that has a lot of views on, or missions on society in general. So there's a societal component, but also a commercial component to it. But still with the focus on excellent basic research, because everything that we fund has to generate really high-level academic excellent research as well. But in this domain, when you have closed the gap, that's not a contradiction anymore.
Thank you. I just, we will come back to that, and I would just like to bring the other domain expert that we have today, Linda. You're about to publish a research study, research from a study that we have been doing together or with collaboration, where you have interviewed police and child psychiatrists about their experience of meeting children who have been sexually abused online. So if you just can share a little bit of the headlines from that research, but also your thoughts about how this could benefit from a multi-sectoral approach, including AI. And I remember we did explore using AI for transcription and analysis of the interviews, but it was complicated. So maybe you can share just some experiences from that, and then we can come back to the interdisciplinarity.
A lot.
Yes.
But just some reflections here, because that's what I will come back to, that a project like this is very similar to what we could really need within psychiatry and social work. Because if we could actually tag what people are talking about when they meet a patient, that would be on such a value for knowing if a model is really working. Because when we are doing evaluation of a treatment program, for example, we assume that people actually are doing what they are supposed to do, but when you look into it, we know Moa is laughing here, because we know that when we look into this, people say, no, I'm not doing that part and not that part, and that would be so valuable information, because that if we could have that kind of data, we could actually see what works and what professionals think works for that specific child or perpetrator, or whoever it is. So I think this have so much interest, not just on working on its own, so to say, to treatment. So I think they are very linked to what I'm going to say, but to just back like 100 steps from that project, we did interviews with police, Swedish police, and also child psychiatrists about their experience of meeting children victims of online sexual abuse. And as I said this morning, the abuse is severe, everyone can see that, and shame and guilt and all that we have talked about. But what struck me in this project is that quite few professionals actually meet And when I say professional, I mean like in psychiatry. I equalize it with psychiatry, but also social services, because I've had on that interview, that very few meet this group of children. So today we say there are so many children, or they are so affected and so on, but no one really sees them except for the police, because it's the police. And now I look also at, we have civil organizations. I know that they are there, but they were not included in this material. So I'm sure we will get another picture if we included you. But the police actually is doing the psychosocial work with online sexually abused children today. What we also found in this study is that children are not interviewed in the barnahus, as we have built up to support the most vulnerable children. No, they are interviewed sometimes at the police station, or they can use barnahus premises, but they don't get like the whole package with barnahus. And that is actually a very worrying result, because I also work with barnahus out in Europe, and I would say that Sweden is one of the worst countries in this sense, that these children don't get that support. And when I'm saying that, for you who don't know barnahus, that means this multidisciplinary support where you get access to social services, child psychiatry, but also medicine. And that is not the case for these children. So that's what we found. But on a positive note, all the professionals, I think we have interviewed around like 50 now in this project, is that everyone is very positive. Everyone wants to learn more. They are really on the edge of like want to develop, adjust their working methods. So it's very hopeful. So I think that from the professional side, it's not a problem with going ahead, for example, of using AI and all that. But the struggle is also, as we see, with law, with jurisdiction, because it's so sensitive data and where to store it. And that was the problem we had when we wanted to use AI to actually, as another colleague, so to say. So when we are thematizing the material, it would be fantastic to have another colleague who's working in another way, and then we can compare. But we couldn't do that. I think it was a bit too early for our university, but I think also this was like 1.5 years ago or something, that it might be a little bit different now. So it's a process, and from municipalities and universities, there are state universities, the governmental organization, everything is very slow. So it's very good to come to conferences like this, and we meet others who are working more fast. So I'm hopeful. Yeah.
Good. So we see there's, or first the question is, so do you agree with us then that there is potential in multidisciplinary work between those fields? And if so, how do we start? You found each other, but how will others find each other? How do we get the AI researchers and experts kind of see that there is value or interest? How do we make it feel relevant and interesting enough for them?
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, we started and found each other about a year ago at a similar type of event. So these events are really important. And I think if you would go to an AI conference, you would find that there are many, many AI researchers who are just itching to do something relevant. It's usually about resources and time. And when we say about resources, it's not just the money in itself, but it's also supporting, for example, someone like me who wants to do basic research but also needs a lot of engineering support, right? Finding a way to build a team of PhD students, of senior researchers, but also research engineers. And that's where the costly process comes in understanding the full landscape of where could you find such resources. And it's sometimes difficult because, of course, everybody wants to see some results first. So I think what we're doing now is we're kind of volunteering a lot of our time to explore things together so we get enough initial results to build upon. And that's, I think, where the challenge comes from, because like I said, it's kind of what we do in the evenings and on the weekends and finding those precious moments in between to do something. But the motivation is definitely there.
Yeah.
Kristina.
At RISE, we often find that cross-disciplinary researchers help build these teams because they're not as deep, or we are not as deep, but we can kind of start the communication channel. There are also lots of deeper researchers who are very good at talking to each other as well. But one thing I really think that you pointed out that I think is super relevant is the fact that, in a sense, right, the people who do the foundational research of AI, they don't necessarily do the entire system, right? They might train the model, they might fine-tune the model, but the system is so much more than that. And if you work with human-centered research like me, we'd like to have something that we can try out on users. And then in between, you have to have this layer of software engineering, and that's usually not research, so that's really difficult to find in all cases, right? And I think that's part of, as Anders says, companies succeed. And part of that is that they also have people who build the entire chain of stuff. And we have like this tiny thing over here in the technology, and then we have like this human-centered bit over here. But the bridge between these, it's a lot of work.
In fact, yeah.
Christoffer.
Yeah, I also agree that these kinds of events are really important, but the way we're working in our research group, I also want to mention Maria Breide here. You will be doing your your latter part of your PhD on this collaborative work, so very good to have you in the room as well. So what we're doing in our research group is that we have adopted a model from UK called patient and public involvement. It means that we involve external representation from many different fields in society to we invite them actively to discuss our research, both our research questions, our outcome measures, our methods, and all of that. So that is how I have met several of the people in my professional network. That includes law enforcement, prison and probation services, child rights organizations, representatives with lived experience of having pedophilia, and all. So we, via that channel we meet the people with different methodological backgrounds. So we have brain imaging, AI research, qualitative interviewing, RCTs. We have many different methods in our research group, and that is thanks to this new model. I think we should adopt more in Sweden, patient and public involvement in our research. Then I also want to send a thank you to the research schools at Karolinska that I know also exist on other universities. Very good research schools for PhD students to learn all these new modern methods. That includes AI, and I think that is inspirational for the future research generations.
I think we unfortunately need to wrap up. I will give you all, ask you all to say, kind of, if you have any final remarks or advice to those who would like to embark on collaboration in research. But first, just one concrete question, and I know Linda, Christoffer, Kristina, you have talked about ethics and ethics review. Are there any concrete advice, risks, things to think about if you're doing research in the kind of fertilizing research in this field? Anything particular you should have in mind when it comes to ethics review?
I would say, I mean, basically, research is applied ethics. We do this for a cause. Ethics is present all through the process. But I'm also in the ethics review board in Sweden, and so I know the principles of how they work, and the principles that have been that apply to all kinds of research. They're also applicable here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel to understand the basic principles, at least for introducing AI in this kind of research. So I would just say that many of the old principles still apply. We just need to understand how we interpret them in this context.
Okay, thank you, Kristina.
Very quickly, the ethics review is built on doing medical studies where you have a plan outlined beforehand and you get it checked. While interaction design research is an iterative process by design where you kind of like stop at moments and say, should we really go here? Should we go over here instead? And that's been, if you involve people who do human-centered design and so on, it's going to be very difficult to involve them in the ethics process. It's not cheap.
Okay,
So
so
that's-
that was not a question with easy answer then,
Nope.
but you could have hoped. So I give you all a minute for a final remark, and if you have some advice for the group. Who wants to start? Amy. Start in the
Should
middle.
I start? I needed a minute to think about what my final remark would be. No, I think so. I think when it comes to doing multidisciplinary research, one thing that I recommend is that you gather the experts in the room and you put the problem in the middle of the room and let everyone look at it from their angle, without necessarily having the pressure of being tightly intertwined together, but rather everyone looks at it from their perspective, find the contribution that is relevant for them, and then give it time. We talk about fast fashion, slow fashion. I almost like to talk about fast science, slow science. I think really to do good research, it needs time to develop the kind of collaboration between the researchers and time to really find those interesting research questions. But it is rewarding.
Thank you. Christoffer?
I don't know if I have any like super wise words to say, but I mean there are so many questions to research in this field, but and to come up with new ideas is not the problematic part of the process. It is to find ways to come through this process with an intact ethical compass, and it is possible, but it's maybe not the first idea that comes to mind that you need to continue with, but it takes these discussions.
Thank you. Kristina?
I'd like to just say that Amy's comment about time, I think that when we are the most effective, we think we're actually the least effective because we become very effective about the wrong question.
Thank you. Linda?
Yeah, when I'm thinking about multidisciplinary, I'm also thinking about, now we talk about AI tech and we talk about psychiatry in this case, but if we involve other players as well, like the police, social services, so on, for me that's the multidisciplinary group that I work with. With my experience with that is that sometimes we talk different languages, we focus on different groups, and today I was sitting next to police, and when we had the chit chats after the first seminars, we reflected on, we are talking about different groups. We are talking about children, as we said, they are from 0 to 18, they are totally different. There were quotes from pedophiles wanted to have a baby doing something, and then in the next sentence we talk about we need to reach young people at Snapchat. I mean, babies are not on Snapchat, so we are talking, and the police said, but I'm not interested in prevention, I'm interested in identify this specific child, and maybe I'm interested in treatment side and so on. So I really like what Amy said. We need to sit down before starting up a project and really address and really be specific in what are we going to do in this project and how are we going to work, because there will be difficulties, and also with jurisdictions and everything. And I also want to stress that we talking about ethics. I mean, the AI arena, what we talk about today, is an international global problem. It's a hassle to get ethical permission in projects where you have different countries and different legislations. So that also, it's a problematic area, but we will solve it. But so we are we stand into challenges, but also a lot of positive possibilities, of course. So yeah.
Thank you. And the final word to you, Anders.
Final 3 things then, all right.
Yeah.
I'll be short. The first one, as much as I agree that we have a very thorough approach to ethics in Sweden, I think the whole scenario is changing, and it's in some way outdated, because we're seeing examples of simple things like public access to information, governmental information, is being abused by individuals with the power of AI to do extremely unethical things, and it's not. We have no way of controlling that. So there's an issue, right? The second thing is relating to going the last mile. If you want to make something that really works, don't underestimate the effort that goes into the last mile. I'm producing exhibits for museums that the kids are using, right? And they interact with things. If it works, it's fine. If it doesn't work, they try a little more. If it still doesn't work, they start hitting on it. So everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and therefore the last mile is where you need to spend the effort, and that's where the research engineering goes in. So finding the resources for that. That's where 90% of your funding goes. The last thing I wanted to say is that I'm sort of dogmatic in terms of not replacing humans. I don't think that AI should be allowed to replace humans in any of the situations that we're seeing. What is it that you're transferring away from the human? Is you can offload. Offloading is fine, but actually replacing. Look at things like in a situation when you have an interview situation, the non-verbal communication, the tacit knowledge, the human contacts that you have. We're not there yet, and I'm sort of doubtful that we will get there within our lifetimes, right? So that scenario is, for me, the human in the loop, the human-centered AI is super important. And I'm in the business of producing avatars that can talk to children in the schools, but it has to be together with the teacher. It has to be mediated. It has to be a human component in that learning situation. Otherwise, we're going the wrong way.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to the panel. So now we have a break, and the point with the long break is for you to continue to talk to each other, because I know everybody here has a lot of knowledge and experience to contribute with. And with the Stella Polaris project, we have 1 more year to go with funding for that. And one of the things we want to do and can do is to bring people in the room around a problem. So if you have a problem that you would like us to address, come to us. Or if you have an idea but you don't really know who to work with, come to us or somebody else that you met during this day and just suggest, and then we can find out. And you met Erika and Susanna. They are working a lot with understanding who does what and who could be a potentially good partner in that. So do talk to us and each other. And after the break, downstairs is a panel on data. So if you're thinking about, is there available data to do this research, you can go to that session. Or you can stay here and talk about cybersecurity, which is also really, really interesting. So thank you.